I believe I did.
There it goes.
Yes, great.
There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. Looks like we have a pretty good turnout for today. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you have a camera. We'd love to see your faces. Hey, John, thanks for turning your camera on. My name is Brian Stice. I'm a psychologist and local recovery coordinator within the VA Eastern Colorado Healthcare System, serving the Denver metro area. And so I'm one of the steering members of the Veteran Community Partnership. And so for today, we have another one of our networking calls. And we have invited for today Chaplain Skaggs, who is the chief of our chaplain services here within VA Eastern Colorado. And so as he noted, he didn't bring any structured presentations to go over, but wanted to give him an opportunity to share with you all about some of the services that we offer in our chaplain service, and then give plenty of time for questions from the audience. We have not a huge number of people, so I think we should probably be okay once we're ready to take questions to have people come on the mic. If you're able to raise your hand using Teams, then I'll try to track who's got their hand up and in what order, and I'll moderate as we get closer to that point. If you have questions that you'd rather just type in the chat, feel free to put your questions in the chat as well. And for everybody who's here, feel free in the chat to state your name, organization, if you have an email or phone number that you'd like to list for people to get a hold of you in the future, and I'll do that as well. And again, thanks for joining us today. We're also here with a couple, I think, of our other Veteran Community Partnership committee, including Courtney. Courtney, would you like to do a brief intro?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney McGuire. I'm the VCP VA co-chair. And so we host events like this throughout the year. And I believe most of you that are on this call are already a VCP member and receive emails from myself regarding these events and our monthly newsletters. If not, if you scroll to the top of the chat, I had put my contact information, my email, our VCP website, as well as our Twitter information, because you could follow us on Twitter as well. And please reach out to me if you have any questions or want to get more involved with our VCP.
Thanks, Courtney. And then we also have part of our steering committee here as well, Katie Civiletto-Stanger. Katie, do you want to give a brief intro before we get into the discussion?
Sure, Brian, thank you. Hi, my name is Katie Civiletto-Stanger. You may recognize my middle last name more than you recognize my new last name, but I am on the steering committee. I worked with Given Hour as a national nonprofit for the last 5 years, and now I work with Summit Behavioral Healthcare as a national veterans coordinator. So I'm happy to help out however I can. I can help to connect veterans back to the VA and help them to navigate the systems and identify how to access mental health services and substance abuse services across the nation. So if you need anything in that capacity, I think, Courtney, you put my new email out in the newsletter, right?
I did.
You should have it, but I can drop it in the chat as well. It's good to see some familiar faces, and thank you, Chaplain Skaggs, for putting this together. We're excited to have you.
Cool.
Welcome.
Thanks, Katie. All right, Chaplain Skaggs, we'll let you take it away and start off telling us all about the services that you have, and we'll move to questions from the audience.
Okay, I said I didn't have slides. I do have structure. So
that works. That works too.
What we advertised was that we would talk about spiritual wellness, an essential catalyst to living well and dying well. So, and the 3 points there. So I will briefly speak about that and what we provide and how to get a hold of us. And I think I'll lead by that. We have chaplains that are either on duty or on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. There's always somebody on call when there's not somebody here. and we have chaplains in the hospital 7 days a week during the day. We also have a chaplain in Pueblo, actually Colorado Springs and Pueblo, to deal with and provide care down in Colorado Springs in the southern areas. We have chaplains that go to the outpatient clinic in Golden, Valor Point, when we get that the ability to do that once again. So we'll be back over there. Our chaplains are integrated with the palliative care team, mental health teams, ICU medical teams. So we try to be as connected and accessible as possible because we really believe spiritual wellness is a part of healing that's critical. And certainly the VA feels that way. And the VA defines spirituality as what gives a person purpose and meaning in life. And for some, that includes religious beliefs and a belief in a higher power. Not for all, certainly. But spiritual wellness, whatever a person's belief system, is important. We encourage that people know and think about what they believe and why they believe it and how that impacts their life. So their place in the universe, their purpose, their meaning, what gives them that kind of that passion and gusto to live, and the person's spirit and spirituality, we believe, comes from that place. So first of all, are you all familiar with the whole health wheel that came out a couple years ago? I'm sure you all probably have seen that and are familiar with it. And you notice that spirit and soul is a key part of that as well. One of those 7 factors there. Am I counting right? Maybe there's 8 factors. Yeah, there's 8. I've got the wheel in front of me, by the way. So spirit and soul is there on the left side of the center. And we look at those other areas and we know if someone's physical body, their muscle structure, the bone structure is not working right, their internal body systems aren't working right, it's hard to handle the additional stresses that life puts on. It's one other thing, whether it's a mental illness, whether it's a relational stress. And as you know, someone who has mental difficulties, difficulty processing, difficulty maintaining a thought process and a reasoning process. It's difficult for them to handle life in the whole, relationships and carrying out their business. And certainly all of us have seen people that end up disconnected from family, homeless, unable to manage their lives. And part of that is mental, part of that is physical, part of that is spiritual. And all of the other connections, social functions and relational issues, all of those are important for a person to be able to, in a healthy way, manage their lives. If you look at that diagram, there's a place where it says mindful awareness and me. Physically, you can kind of poke at that and see what physiologically is going on there. All of the things that mental health providers do help the mind function, even deal with emotions, deal with social connections, which are all vital. My position is if somebody's not spiritually well, all those other things don't work well either. Okay, so I see that place where we observe ourselves and observe others as the spiritual part of a person. For those of us who may believe in a higher power and feel connected to the universe, connected to a creator or a God, it's that place that we make that connection. It's not just thinking that and trying to make a mental connection. It's not physically touching and reaching out to that connection with the higher power, or even for some people who don't believe in a specific higher power, to the universe or to nature. It's from that place that we make those kinds of connections. So the spiritual part of a person is how they see themselves and others, where the will is developed, where passion comes from, motivation, creativity, dreams, senses, and how that kind of motivation impacts all of the other senses, connectivity deeply with self and others and the sacred, and that sense of purpose and meaning and belonging. Kind of their place in the world, one's place in the world. We all kind of strive to understand that, don't we? How do we fit in? Maybe to our family, to our community, to what does our life matter in our time span that we're living? And is there anything beyond our current life that we're living for? And for some, that's if someone doesn't believe in life after death or that kind of concept, or even a reincarnation, some believe in after we die, it's just done. And people that are spiritually well can still, the way I've seen people who are spiritually well, who have that kind of a belief, it motivates them to live well, to leave a legacy, to leave an impact. And that comes from a well spirit, based on what they believe and why they believe it and how it impacts their lives. So chaplains don't provide, we don't try to press our belief on someone. We're all endorsed by some denomination or faith group. Our chaplain staff consists of various Protestant groups, Catholic. We have a rabbi on staff. We have a Buddhist chaplain on staff. And we have connections in the community to other resources that we can't personally provide the ritual kinds of things that people need. The chaplains are all trained to interact with any person and evaluate how they're doing spiritually, what impacts that, what connections they have in the community. Hopefully, if you've seen some of our patient notes, those of you that do that, you can see that kind of the whole person concept and how they're doing spiritually impacts all those areas, and as it is impacted by those areas. So it's a place where if a person's spiritually well, they feel peaceful, grounded, resilient, and able to take on additional stressors in life. And much the same as physical, mental. If there's a lot of problems going on there, it affects even the person's will to live and desire to get connected to others, desire to even put out effort to get better physically or to get better mentally. And I say spiritual wellness is a catalyst, because if there's not that peaceful foundation of kind of I'm settled in being myself, who I am and what I believe and why I'm here and where I'm going. If a person has that, they can face a lot of things in life, a lot of crisis in life. With a well spirit, with a well spiritual self, one's motivated by a sense of meaning and purpose, destiny, their impact on the world, and able to look outside themselves and see themselves as part of something bigger. Does that make sense to you? You've probably heard some of these words, plenty of these words before, but I want to put it out here for the sake of our discussion. They're able to find their way through adversity and adapt their lives and meet the challenges of health, mental wellness, relational, interpersonal, and challenges with a resilience and determination, because that person that's spiritually well is settled in the center of themselves, how they see themselves, how they see the world. So how does that impact when someone faces death? What we look for is well, and first of all, let me just say, if you've seen people die who are not spiritually well, it's not a pretty sight. People are struggling, unsettled, trying to grasp at every straw to stay alive, fearful, and sometimes confused, and sometimes they just want sedation so they can't even can't think at all and just die. We've seen that. It's difficult. So what we do as chaplains in the case of someone who is in palliative care or dying is do some life review, talk to them about things that are sacred to them, family connections that are sacred and important to them. And we try to understand, does the person have a solid belief about their enduring purpose, their life's meaning, the meaning of the suffering they're going through, about what they understand about life after death, and do they have a sense of what comes next. If a person's spiritually well, they can deal with these kinds of issues with some level of confidence and peace. If facing loss due to, as we all get older, we all know, if you haven't, you'll figure it out pretty quick. Something hurts different every day when you get up, and it seems like you're losing continually something due to health issues. Maybe it's relationships, family, financial. All that goes with declining ability to function fully in life like a person sees themselves wanting to do. So people start dealing with loss, and chaplains help them start dealing with loss as they're approaching a disease that's life-altering, palliative care, or even the later stages where they go to hospice. Really helping people talk about, giving them an opportunity, facilitating conversation with them and their family, if they have family, settling issues of, have you thought about this? Have you said what you need to say to this person? Are you feeling well and at peace in your spirit? Are things right between you and your higher power? If you believe, the first thing we do when we go see a patient is to connect with them and understand, gain their trust by discussing just kind of light conversation, then quickly get into what's important to them. What are your belief systems? Are there religious activities? Are there communities of faith? Are there communities of maybe it's enjoying the outdoors, or art, or photography, music, whatever it is? Are there things that are important to you that give you peace? And we try to understand that before we approach more specific things. Okay, if they're Muslim, do they need to have lined up somebody to come and do a purification for them? Do they have certain rituals or family members that want to come in, or clergy that need to come in? They need to spend some time with them. Have they thought about leaving memories for their families? Have they thought about the legacy they're leaving? Have they settled their financial issues? Because all of those things, and you might have seen as well, some people just, maybe they're good with a lot of things, but they need someone to tell them, some particular person to tell them it's okay to die. I'm going to be okay. And I don't know how many times I've seen a wife or a son or a daughter tell a grandma or grandpa, I'm going to be okay. So and so is going to take care of me, going to help me. I have things settled. I know I'm going to be okay. You can go ahead and go. And somehow in that will, in that spiritual part of the person, they're able to let go and to die in peace, knowing that that they're leaving their loved ones in good shape. Okay, so that's my frame up. What questions do you have? Crickets.
Go ahead, John.
This is not so much on a client type of question, but my mother died last year, and I was with her, in those last days, and I've always heard that people can still hear you when that's the last sense to go. Of course, I didn't have any real sense of that, but I'm just curious, if your reflection on that, and because I tried to say everything that I could to her in those last days.
Well, first of all, medically, that's what they tell us, right? That's what the doctors tell us and all that. But there's been a lot of cases where someone has, and I've talked to some of them who've been in a coma, for example. And the doctors are like, there's not a lot of brain activity. But when the person wakes up, they remember specific conversations that people have said to them. I remember a case where before I was in the VA, I was visiting a dying woman. She had some people in from her church. Together, we sang some hymns that she loved, and just there in the room. And the woman was completely non-responsive, right? And they were just expecting her to die. Just before she died, she reached over, grabbed my hand, and gave a big smile, and died within a minute. Okay, so sometimes a person's able to grab that last bit of will and give a wink, give a hand squeeze when they've not been responsive. I think that's pretty amazing, and that's the will of the person's spirit, is what I believe, that helps them push through all the other boundaries and give that last assurance to a family member. I don't know if that helped. But
thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, so this is Barbara. I'm a VC down in Colorado Springs and
Barbara.
Pueblo. Does a person need to be fully enrolled in the VA to get a phone call from somebody like you?
The person has to be a veteran.
Okay, so outside of that, they don't need to be fully enrolled in the whole VA process?
We may be the only one in the VA that works that way, but we're going to take care of veterans if they call us. And we help veterans get signed up and connected with the VA. Because they're important, we feel all that care is important. The entire team's important, but sometimes we're the first place somebody calls. Something we've started doing, we've been doing it about 1.5 years now, is, we used to have a memorial service and reach out to the bereaved for those who died in the hospital.
Right.
But it always broke my heart to hear, when somebody leaves here and they go to hospice and die on the way or die shortly after. And usually hospice has a chaplain, but when people go home on hospice, they don't have a chaplain. In a lot of cases, they go to a nursing home. Many nursing homes don't have chaplains. If they do, they're volunteer pastors and aren't chaplain clinically trained. I call it chaplains are. So we started reaching out to the next of kin for every veteran that died in our catchment area that we heard about. As you can imagine, some are signed up, some aren't. Once in a while, we get a call from a coroner that a veteran died and they're not in the VA. We still, if we can, we establish a record. And if not, we can establish a collateral record for the next of kin. And just so you're aware, I wasn't aware of the magnitude. So it took us several months to figure out how to get all that information, to quantify it and figure out how to address that many next of kin. Because we had 1 year that was 1,000 veterans in a year, and then the next year was 1,200 veterans in a year. This year is probably going to be closer to 1,400 or 1,500 veteran deaths in a year. Some of that is because we're finding out about more deaths. I know suicide prevention and post-prevention team they're working with different counties to get that information when there's a veteran death to get that to the VA. So I expect those numbers to grow. But we have a system in place. Every 2 months, we have a last roll call of remembrance. Once in a while, we get a call. Last week, we get a call from a veteran's brother who died, I think it was October last year. They said, well, I heard you're doing this. Can I have my brother honored in that? So we put him into the next, every 2 months, we put him into the next group and send them a virtual connection. They can call in and watch a virtual last roll call of remembrance ceremony and see their veteran's name come up and be read and a bell ring. We do a ceremonial flag folding with all the meanings of the folds. We have some patriotic music. We were doing that live until, or the musicians, I should say, the singers were there live until COVID got in the way. So I suspect we'll get back to that. Some of the volunteer employees and veterans from the hospital like to get involved when they can.
Yeah, so I bring that up because we have amazing chaplains and social workers who can help with the VA and do all of that. Here I'm with Bristol Hospice. So we do have fully accredited chaplains. I was kind of asking for those fringe people who don't want to be part of the VA. They have, whatever their mental block is, whatever piece they're already in the VA, they don't want to give
a lot of Vietnam veterans.
Part of it. And so that's why I asked.
A lot of Vietnam veterans, even some that go to the vet centers that are loosely associated with the VA. Records aren't connected, but that's why they go there and they don't come to the hospital. So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Barbara, for the question. Chaplain Skaggs, I was going to put it in the chat just to make sure the process hasn't changed. They call the main number and then extension 0 and ask for a chaplain. Is that still the correct process?
Yes.
To reach a chaplain. Okay.
And the reason we do that, and I know there's been problems with operators and waiting. I think they've been trying to fix that. I think they've got a good solution going now, where we'll get there. And when we get through COVID, there'll be about 50% less calls. For call waiting. But the thing is, if it's night or after hours, our phones aren't manned here in the office. So the operator would be the one to pick up the call. And they can call, they have the list of who's on call and they can call directly. Even during the day, they can call directly or call us on Vocera, this little device that's noisemaker. So it's kind of like one of those beam me up Scotty devices where they can talk into it, call Chaplain, and it calls whoever's logged in during.
So I have another question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. So for those, and generally they're gentlemen, for those veterans who are hesitant for pretty much anything, but as you said, having those spiritual conversations is a holistic look. Do you have some suggestions on how to initiate that call or to get them to initiate that call, or any suggestions on how to bridge that gap there between knowing this is what would really help them and just reaching that hand out?
So I would think your chaplains would know how to initiate that conversation. Are you saying people that don't want to see your chaplain?
People that don't want to see my chaplain, or even people who are not ready for hospice or don't think they're ready for hospice, another resource to offer.
Okay. You could mention that you've met some VA chaplains. We're willing to visit with them, kind of walk with them through that change of life they're going through, their new challenges they're going through, and from a perspective of one who is as a veteran and understands veterans. Okay. And it wouldn't have to go in their medical record if they don't want it to.
Okay. Awesome.
That costs us workload when we do that, but we'll do it. You know what I mean? I would rather them have a record and I can chart the workload.
Right.
But that's never going to stop us from giving care.
Okay. And so I know that sounds maybe basic to a lot of people. Please, I'm not from a veteran family. I'm new to the veteran community. So I'm still trying to, figure out how to help people who are a part of that community, but not accessing it. So thank you for clarifying something that might have been very simple.
Well, and you might have figured out already that there's a group of people right after Vietnam that didn't trust the government for anything because of the way some things, went over with that whole war. In the 1980s, the VA started vet centers to reach out to those kind of folks that would they can come and receive social work care, some counseling, even family counseling. And of course, Brian could explain exactly what we have here at vet centers probably better than I could. But if we get a call from a vet center and they're trying to connect us to a veteran, chaplain's going to visit with them on the phone. So there are ways that group of people that came out of the military in the 60s and 70s is probably the most reticent to reach out to the VA for care.
Thank you.
Barbara, I was also going to mention, and I'll put this in the chat as well. You may already be familiar with this. There's the We Honor Veterans program, which has volunteers for hospice. Is your organization involved in that program?
We are, but I'm a new VC, so I'm still getting my feet wet in the whole We Honor Veterans program as well.
Yeah, that's a good option then.
And veterans, some will only talk to veterans about the kinds of things they need to work through if they're combat related, service related. So maybe an organization like that or one of our military chaplains would be able to, if you say, as a veteran, this veteran knows what it's like to be a veteran. And if you want to talk about things that you want to talk about with anybody else, maybe this is a good connection. Just so you know, I was 20 years in the Air Force, served 20 years in the Air Force. One of our other chaplains spent 8 years serving in the Navy with the Marines and Seabees and Coast Guard. Another one is retired Air Force chaplain down in Colorado Springs. And our other part-time chaplains, I think all but 2 of our other chaplains are veterans themselves.
With all the restrictions around COVID, I know that you mentioned that you were doing phone calls. Are you ever doing any kind of telehealth visits? Like what we're doing now? Oh.
Yes, we use VA Video Connect, so it's secure. And as a matter of fact, I've got one today at 1 o'clock. And they're doing those 3 or 4 days a week in Colorado Springs and as needed here. Of course, here most of the time people are in the hospital or coming to the hospital. We're doing face-to-face meetings, with the proper precautions. It's basically each one wearing a mask and maintaining distance.
That's great.
I don't want to use Zoom because it's not very secure. Teams is probably better than Zoom.
I'm just remembering several years ago before I came to the VA to work, I was a social worker with an outpatient hospice agency, and I always found the most challenging dealing with veterans, but mostly family members or loved ones who had a lot of anger around the death or the diagnosis that their loved one had, and sometimes I just felt like they were pretty stuck in that anger, and it was really hard to try to work with them to get them out of that place of just being stuck. Do you have any tips, or do you want to just talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yes, of course. One of the common reactions to a loved one dying, if there's close family connections, sometimes even if not, but is anger. And it's either anger at the system, anger at the staff, anger at the war they had to go through, like Agent Orange or something like that, where the VA maybe didn't acknowledge or take care of people, and for many years with Agent Orange. I acknowledge their anger, acknowledge their, affirm their feelings, and then try to move to tell me about your veteran. There'll be time for working through your anger, working through complaint processes. There'll be time for, working through all that. Right now is the time to remember your loved one and grieve. And if you spend a lot of time stuck in a place of anger and working through those, even though maybe they're legal issues or complaints or that kind of thing, it's going to complicate your grief. And I'll tell them that. It makes it, you need to take time to grieve, and we're here to help you with that. And then points you to the right place if you'd like to make some complaints or find improvements in the system. We want to help you do that. So it's trying to bring them back to, we're here right now with losing or lost your loved one, whatever the case might be. Can we spend time helping us to get to know your veteran, telling us about that veteran, honoring them with our words and our and ceremony or whatever we're doing, and can we set that aside for a few days? Even all the funeral arrangements, there's a lot of stuff to do, but let's set aside what we can set aside, do what we need to do, and deal with honoring your loved one. That usually, believe it or not, helps people come back to that place where they're really feeling. What they're really feeling is grief that's generating anger, grief, sadness, wishing they'd have said things or done things that they didn't do. Seldom is it actually the system that's a major issue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me just say too, sometimes people view, we hear, you've probably heard the word ministry of presence. Ministry of presence is good. It's what we do. For some people, having a chaplain there represents the sacred or the holy, that there's if their belief systems line up, there's a God that cares about them and is walking with them through this, and walking through their loved one with this. I think it's important, and chaplains are trained to provide that ministry of presence, but also facilitate the grieving process and the moving through grief. That's different from everybody. I mean, I should say different for everybody. What is meant to say? We have a grief group. That was a tongue twister for some reason. We have a grief group that we're actually in our first set of that, and it'll go on for 3 months, and we'll do it every 4 months, so 3 times a year.
Nice.
we're having just a wonderful response to that right now. I think there's 12 people, 12 next of kin in that group. You don't want to go much larger than that because people need to be able to share and have time to really interact with the material and one another. Well, we also give a list of all the grief groups in the community. You know, there's a lot of great groups out there. There are some faith-based, some not. Various different kinds of approaches. Some from a religious aspect, some from totally not religious at all. So we give people a list of all the ones that we know about, and which is a pretty long list, and encourage people to connect where they feel like they can best connect and, you know, be understood.
We have any other questions from the attendees? Still have time. If anybody has a question, or you can feel free to type it in the chat.
Who's the anonymous person?
Good. No telling.
While the anonymous person speaking, they might be muted.
Oh, maybe.
I saw the circle come on there. So.
Like that, yeah. Chaplain Skaggs, one thing that I thought might be helpful for our attendees is if you could differentiate the role of a chaplain and also like the training of a chaplain versus community clergy, because there are some unique differences between those roles.
There are, yes. And all of us have been community clergy, right? So each chaplain is ordained and endorsed to be a chaplain by a denomination of some sort, a religious group of some sort. So we all have a belief where is our solid place and our spiritual well place where we feel well connected and understand and believe. We need that, and because of that, we can then try to understand everyone else. Does that make sense? And be acceptable and tolerant for whatever people believe. And as community clergy, they may not learn that. You know, community clergy is focused on that denomination, that church group that they're with, non-denominational, whatever it is, and that faith community. They're involved in that group that they're pastoring or providing care for. And a lot of their role is a teaching role, a preaching role, some counseling, some hospital visits. It's not the primary thing they do. Dealing with death and dying, depending on the size of the congregation, is a few times a year maybe. With chaplains, it's a few times a week, as far as death and dying, unfortunately, and some every day if they're doing a bereavement program. So chaplains are trained beyond the Master of Divinity degree, an undergraduate degree, Master of Divinity degree. We learn about other systems and religions around the world. We learn about how the spiritual part of a person works, and a whole context of material to work from. Some community clergy are not theologically educated to that level. So in doing that, we've been able to connect with other people from other faith groups and have discussions and learn how to work back and forth with those other people that we may not agree with theologically or even understand theologically. So part of, after a person's been educated in those ways, licensed and ordained and endorsed by their faith group, which is really saying this person is able to function as a chaplain in a pluralistic society, They're trained and well, able to do that by the religious body, even though they represent a particular religious organization. Another thing a chaplain is required to do is take 4 units of clinical pastoral education. It's like a doctor's internship, working alongside other chaplains, being immersed in and providing direct care to patients in all parts of the hospital. So very, very intensive 4 years that they're not getting paid much to do, like most interns. So it's a big commitment on the part of someone to become a chaplain, much like becoming a doctor, psychologist, nurse, social worker. It's an all-in kind of a thing. During that time, the chaplains are trained and learned how to write notes that are medically usable for the rest of the staff, for example, how to work in integrated teams, how to approach life changes and death and bereavement and next of kin. That's all part of the training. On top of that, after a person's had all of those requirements, we're required to have board certification. And as of October last year, that became a requirement for anybody coming into the VA new, already having the board certification. From that, in order to go up in position, we have to specialized. There's additional specialty training we have to go through and have a certification from a board of peers through a nationally recognized certifying organization. And we're Title 38. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. It's so our workload counts just like Brian's workload counts, or a doctor or a nurse or social worker. We're able to do that, and it brings income into the hospital just like everybody else's does. It used to be chaplains were overhead until October last year. And you wonder why maybe we don't have enough chaplains, because they saw us as administrative and overhead. So the VA as a whole has moved to where chaplains are a clinical part of the team, a part of the clinical team, although we have been all the time. Did that answer the question?
Thank
Brian?
you very much. And then I also know that you've even gone above that and gone through the mental health chaplaincy integration certification. Yes. So there's even more advanced training such as that.
I happen to be in the first cohort of that. There's an organization back in Durham, North Carolina, that was put together about 5-6 years ago, which includes chaplains, mental health providers, psychologists, social workers. They're co-located. They work together every day, and they work on issues, some active duty and VA both. The group I was part of was 20 VA chaplains and 20 military chaplains. Because I don't know if you've all seen this. You probably have. Sometimes we don't see veterans until 10, 20 years, 30 years after their service, where they haven't dealt with their PTSD, with their moral injury, with their relational issues, with reconnecting with life. I mean, their lives are just destroyed because they haven't got help when they first came out, for whatever reason, didn't connect with the VA. So part of the initiative was to get VA chaplains and military chaplains talking and doing a better job of handing off when we know somebody needs care. So we have a network of chaplains now, 120 I think have gone through, maybe 160 now, have gone through that training in the last 5 years. So more and more of the chaplain corps in the VA is connected with military chaplains, understanding the tools that mental health providers use, like mindfulness, ACT, motivational interviewing, a couple others that really resemble some of the things we do anyway. But we're able to understand and talk with the same kinds of terms that where we have things common between us and social workers.
Thank you for speaking to that. And it looks like we do have a couple of attendees from DoD, it appears Air Force. So as you mentioned, that training program is a joint DoD-VA training program for chaplains. So I did put that link in the chat for those who might be interested in checking that out further.
You know, there's a lot more military chaplains than there are VA chaplains. So it's harder for military chaplains to get in that program, more competitive. But for VA, it's a year-long program. It's you keep working your job, and you're calling into meetings, doing video conferences, and 4 face-to-face meetings a year, and working through all of the technical material, lots of reading, lots of writing, lots of application. So for a military, it's quite hard for them to, of course, get into that area. But they seem to fill up the classes. So
that's good. Before we run out of time, Chaplain Skaggs, I wanted to ask if you wanted to take the opportunity to let folks know about the community clergy training, in case we do have anybody here representing community clergy in the meeting today.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Matter of fact, I have an invite built that I need to send out today. So we are doing, this will be our second virtual community clergy training meeting. We've joined with suicide prevention, a mental health team here. Together we're talking about suicide prevention, and a little bit about postvention and what's going on there, and about what veterans face as they're transitioning. So churches are able to, pastors, clergy are able to better understand that, how they might be able to help veterans. Some of the issues that veterans are facing, like moral injury, that's so prevalent from those who have been in combat. We found out, as the VA as a whole has found out, and some of you already probably know this, that veterans are more likely to go to a community clergy, their clergy person, somebody they're familiar with, than they are to come to the VA. Initially, when they need help, something's going on, they're unsettled in their spirit, they're not spiritually well, life's not going well. Many will seek out some kind of a clergy person. And if we can educate those persons on suicide prevention, on some of the issues like moral injury, on how to connect with the VA and help somebody get connected to the VA, we think that this is going to be a big help in suicide prevention, which is way more than anybody wants it to be. Maybe a little less than 20 a day now. I know there's been an uptick since COVID has happened, because isolation is so hard on veterans that are suffering with mental illness and spiritual unwellness. So if you want to come, if you want to join that, send me your email and I'll include you on the invite, or send it to Brian, because I think he can send out the invite as well as soon as I finish formatting and send it to him. And come and join us. We're going to try to make this next one coming up more interactive, more like we're doing here. There'll be briefing slides, but we want to leave opportunities throughout the 2-hour session for questions. And there's some preview question, pre-meeting questions that are going to be asked as you sign up.
Wonderful. Chaplain Skaggs, I can share that flyer with Courtney, and then she would also be able to help send it through the VCP distribution list, or include in one of the upcoming newsletters to get the word out to chaplains that might be part of that distribution list.
Very good. Thank you.
It looks like we have Karen Olsen in the chat who put her email in the chat there. Asked if you could include her in the invite.
Yes, I got it.
Great.
Thank you.
And that's going to, thank you. And that's going to be June 2nd from 10 to 12. So if
Yes.
folks want to do a little save the date on their calendar to hold that spot.
I said all that without saying the date, didn't I?
I'm looking out for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Chaplain Skaggs, we just have a couple of minutes left. I surely want to thank you for coming to this networking call to speak to the various Veteran Community Partnership members who are all veteran stakeholder organizations, primarily outside of the VA, to get the word out to them on VA Chaplaincy. Thanks again, and we really appreciate you coming. And also for those who dialed in today, thanks for coming to our networking call. And Courtney will be sure to let you know about future opportunities. Courtney, do you want to mention about the session coming up next month? When is that?
With
Brianne,
yes. Sure. Let's see. So that will be, the topic is on developing solutions for veteran suicide prevention. And that will be led by Dr. Brianne DeBeer. And she's director of VA Patient Safety Center of Inquiry and Suicide Prevention Collaborative. And she's also a clinical research psychologist at RMR with the MIREC. So that will be on Thursday, May 6th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. And I had already sent out a save the date with the flyer, but I am sending out our VCP monthly newsletter for May. I'm sending that out later this afternoon. So that will also have that information in the newsletter.
great.
It's been a pleasure meeting you all and seeing some of you again. Thank you to Brian and Courtney for the invite.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much, Chaplain Skaggs. This was wonderful, very informative. Thank you.
Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, take care, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, and this will be recorded, so we'll have this uploaded on our VCP website, at least by next week, if not later today. Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Bye.
Take care.